This is Rick the Liberty at Treaty 10 News, and today we have a special guest from Manitoba, from the sun rising over here. Joe Fourre is a family member for close to mine, but also, I guess, a grandparent and a parent with very, very traumatic experience with the drug affecting many of our communities and many of our families. So, fentanyl has been a big part of your awareness campaign, and our communities here in Treaty 10, Mr. Fourier, really need to hear your story. We need to know the cookums and mushrooms, need to understand the poisoning that's happening in the drug supply, but also the willpower and I guess the self-discipline that's required by our young people to to be able to, I guess, navigate through their journey to not step into these pitfalls. So your awareness campaign here is priceless, and we welcome you. Joe Fourier, welcome to Treaty 10 News in Northern Saskatchewan.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been quite the journey. You never think that this is going to happen to you. You don't think something like this. Especially what we've been through with you as a family. I mean, Harlan. Let me tell you a little bit of Harlan. Harlan was
Right.
he was a 31-year-old young man who had his life ahead of him. He was a master roofer. He loved his job. He'd been roofing with one company for 10 years. He was investing in the stocks. He was, developing his first serious relationship with a girl, looking forward to the marriage and starting a family. And one night, for whatever reason, he tried something for the first time. And it ended up being a tainted drug that was laced with fentanyl. He had no idea. And it had killed him. It killed him. He went up to the paw. Maybe a lot of people remember the events that happened in April of 2023 in the Pas Manitoba about the tainted drugs and the four men, well, ultimately six men that collapsed in one hotel washroom. He just went up there to go work. His sister lived up there. His brother-in-law was starting a roofing company, and he went to go share his trade. Help. And then the people that he was working with, they went out one night and somebody bought something and it was told it was ecstasy, just I would say a common, party drug that, a lot of youth and young people are taking. Unfortunately, it wasn't. And that therein lied the problem. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I mean, Harlan survived addiction. And when I say Harlan survived addiction, not that he was an addict, but that he had addictive parents. He had parents that had suffered with addiction. So he had survived that. He knew that what hard drugs could do to a family. So it was one of the reasons why we decided to go public with this, is because nobody was talking about this. Nobody was talking about recreational drug use, as it pertained to the opioid crisis.
In terms of I guess, the campaign that you started, uh, it's just you mentioned that there was some research that's required. You had to educate yourself on some of the supply lines of this drug or the effects of this drug. What have you understood in terms of accessing? The Paw Manitoba is a fairly large community, but our little villages are having access to these same drugs as well.
Yeah.
So it's nobody's immune to this, right?
No, I mean, if you got a access road, and I mean, it's not even an access road. We've been to some communities that were strictly flying, and they were still struggling with it. But when Harlan first died, it didn't sit right with me, and so I got on the phone with the coroner's office. We wanted a toxicology report, and the numbers that the Manitoba government were putting out for 2022. that there was 418 opioid deaths, you know, and they would like to class those as overdoses. So I got on to the phone with the statistician. I said, listen, I need to understand this. I need to understand what this number represents because my son was not an addict. And so it took him a while. And when he got back to me, we had this really good discussion because what we found out was that of those 418 deaths, there was 226 that were directly related to fentanyl as a primary cause of death or a contributing factor to the death. So I asked him what that meant. So he said, with the contributing factor, he said fentanyl was mixed with another drug, whether it was marijuana, whether it was cocaine, meth, molly, ecstasy, Xanax, which are common street drugs. But here was the number that he gave me that was really alarming, that 220 deaths occurred last year in 2022 in Manitoba were contributing, which means the drug was mixed with something else. Fentanyl was mixed with another drug and killed 220 people. And that really kickstarted our campaign because nobody was talking about recreational drug use. Everything was all geared toward addiction. Everything was all geared, we have an opioid crisis. We need this, we need this, we need harm reduction. And what that was telling me was it was sending the wrong message to our youth. To say that there was 418 opioid deaths was telling our youth that it was okay to do drugs because I don't do opioids. I just smoke marijuana. I just do a line of cocaine. I just do when I go out, so I'm safe. It gave them a false sense of security in the recreational drug use. So no thanks, I'm good was my son's words. They were Harlan's words. When I told his boss, what happened to Harlan, he couldn't believe it because first thing that came out of his mouth was Harlan didn't do drugs. He said, as a matter of fact, Joe, he said, when we would finish a roof, we would have a couple beers. Somebody would pull out something and Harlan would say, no, thanks, I'm good. I'll stick to my beer. So that's where the whole premise came to start this awareness campaign when it came to recreational drug use, because we need to inform our young people that these drugs aren't safe. Now you asked about how they're getting into the community. Well, they just come in. There's from my experience as an addict, two as a former drug dealer. And I don't say these things frivolously. I mean, this was a part of an old life that I had to heal from, that I had to realize, like I've been in recovery now for 5 years, but they get in because for one simple reason, that there's a demand there. There's a demand in our communities right now. There's poverty, there's hardship, there's all these things that kind of mold into a concoction that would thrive to feed a drug dealer's need for money, because that's there and that's what they feed off of. So our premise was with no thanks, I'm good was, okay, well, we can't do anything about the supply, then let's do something about the demand. Because as anybody understands economics, it's a supply and a demand. If the demand is not there, the supply will leave because there's no reason for it to be there. That's the last thing a drug dealer wants to sit on, is a pile of drugs that he can't sell because there's no money there. Then he'll just leave and take his drug somewhere else where there is a demand. So that's what we've been trying to take to our communities, and I'm really pleased with the support that we've had from MKO and the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs here in Manitoba, that are are getting us to the communities to do these presentations to the communities, not just to young people, but to the parents too, because the parents have a role to play in supporting our youth when they choose to say, no, thanks, I'm good.
Well, the campaign and his words of "No thanks, I'm good" seem appropriate. I heard you talk about an empowering message. You want to empower the youth to be able to be warriors in this, I guess, to make a stand,
Yeah,
to walk
it's
that path and to be careful.
yeah. Well, no thanks. I mean, when we really thought about it, I mean, no thanks. I'm good. It was a twofold message. We grew up in the '70s and the '80s, and we had this say no to drugs. This is your brain on drugs. The commercials that were coming out of the United States and during the Reagan administration. So when we looked at no thanks, I'm good, and we realized that Harlan was a polite man. There was not a malicious bone in this young man's body. He would give you the shirt off his back if he could help. And no thanks for him was polite. No thanks. Didn't matter who you were with. It's always polite. No thanks. But the I'm good part was empowering. You know, to be empowered. I'm good. And as I don't want to be stereotyping anything, but as Indigenous people, we don't often tell ourselves that. You know, very much that we're good. We've grown up with the residential school system. We've grown up with the 60s scoop. We've grown up with a system that has systematically oppressed us so to the point where we feel like we don't fit in and we're not good enough. We're not this or that. And so what I'm good, it's given our youth that empowerment to be able to say, I'm good. And we want to carry that now into the non-Indigenous community because this is not an Indigenous problem. You know, Fentanyl and fentanyl poisoning is not an Indigenous problem. It just so happens that we're highly affected by it. Canada reported in 2022 a little close to 8,000 deaths. And as Indigenous people, we represent 2.9% of this population, but yet we were representing 10% of those deaths. So our people were dying at a higher rate than any other nation in this country. So I'm Indigenous. So right away, I'm going to go to my people and say, hey, listen, we need to do something about this. Um, and this is not an addiction issue. This is a recreational drug issue and we need to tell our young people that recreational drugs aren't safe. So through the help of MKO and the AMC and the chiefs, they realized the importance of this because they're like your communities. They're trying to figure out what can we do, and I think having some strong messaging coming in there and supporting the youth and letting them know that it's okay to say, no, no thanks, I'm good, I don't need this, and allowing their dreams to flourish. I mean, I sit back and I think sometimes, we can build the schools, we can have all the programming, we can have all these things in our communities, but if our kids are dead, who's going to benefit from those? So we really need to really try and get this message out to as many people as we can to try and alleviate the demand so that we can get ahead on our communities and the drugs that are coming in. I mean, yes, there's a lot of social economical problems that have to be addressed, but first and foremost, this is the next generation that's going to look after me when I'm 80 and 90. So I want to make sure that they're there and they're educated and their dreams are realized.
Yeah, it's the death part, and you felt the grief of losing your son, and this message of the youth understanding this danger that's there. It's like it's not even drug. In Korea, maskiki, we say maskiki, but pihtsupuinuma. Pihtsupuin, it means the poison. It's a poison that's in this drug supply, but you're also saying in the recreation world, it's like getting a joint from your local dealer
Yeah,
could be a tainted drug. It's not just the opioid, like you said, or the downtown East Side Vancouver that, hits the spotlight all the time, but it's in our
No,
communities and it's in our kitchens.
yep. I mean, you talked about the death and the finality of it, and yeah, my son's jersey hangs up behind me. We were avid Winnipeg Jets fans. We never missed a game if we could watch it together. We always had those conversations. It's been tough. And when we started this campaign and going into the communities, I remember we were early into it, and we had spoken to two communities, and we are heading to our third. And I looked at my wife; she travels with me, great support. And I look at her, and I said, like, why am I doing this? Why do I go and stand in front of hundreds of people, tear this Band-Aid off, and let my heart bleed, you know, and feel all that pain over and over and over again? And she didn't have an answer for me. She just let me talk. And I remember we were in Cross Lake, Manitoba. We were addressing the youth there. Did the presentation and wrapping stuff up, and the kids all lined up to give us hugs. And we give out little stuff. We give out fridge magnets and stuff that have kind of like the logo that we have here, just a little reminder for their lockers and stuff. And there's a 14-year-old boy come up and he had tears in his eyes, and gave me the biggest hug, and he said, "I'm sorry for your loss." And then he said, "But thank you. Thank you for trying to save our lives and bringing us this information because we didn't know." And that was a surreal moment because that gave me the answer of why I'm doing this, why I chose to do this. Well, I didn't even choose to do this. I mean, nobody chooses to go through this kind of stuff. But it told me that the message that we're delivering outweighs the pain that I'm feeling. So so that's what I go into it, knowing that the importance of this message. And then after every tour, we go. I come home, and the first place I go is back to the lodge. I go back to the lodge. I go sweat. I go heal. Um, and then we carry on again. So it's an important message. I'm hoping that that we can take this nationally across the board to every community, not non-Indigenous and Indigenous. Um, there are things that we need when we talk about addiction. Of course, we need our healing centers, and we need to start treating people. But I think first and foremost, we need to start breaking that cycle, and breaking that cycle um, starts with our young people. Every community that we've been to so far, and we've been to about 8 communities in northern Manitoba, talked to close to over 3,000 students, youth, and community members. And every place that we've been to, there's been a death. There's been somebody affected, somebody's uncle, somebody's aunt, somebody's brother, somebody's son, daughter. And it's just a unending line of grief that this drugs, and specifically now tainted drugs and drug poisoning, has brought to our community at a whole new level. See, one of the things that they talk a lot about overdose. My son didn't die of an overdose. My son died from fentanyl poisoning. And I'll explain that by a little further, because if you look at the word overdose, it's overdose, took too much. My son bought a drug that was relatively supposed to be safe, as any recreational drug can be safe, not knowing that there was fentanyl in it. And that's what killed him, was the fentanyl, because he had no tolerance to it. So that drug was poisoned. So that's what my son died from, fentanyl poisoning. You talked earlier about the number of the young people. We've had reports of young as 10 years old. We've had a family on my wife's side, a family member who smoked marijuana on a regular, because he had suffered some anxiety and his mother was worried. And he says, "No, it's okay. I know my guy. I know my guy." And then one night he smoked a half a cigarette of marijuana and he never woke up in the morning. It was laced with fentanyl. So even though you know your guy, but do you know your guy's guy? And do you know where he gets it from? So there's a whole long line. I know the government has legalized marijuana. So I understand that I can't. So people are going to choose to smoke marijuana. I say, you know what? Buy it from the store. Just like alcohol. Alcohol is not good for you. We know that. Alcohol has destroyed many, many lives and it's legal, but we don't make it anymore. We buy it from the liquor store or whatever. And the same with marijuana. But if we can stop that young generation from getting to that level, we stop it here, and then before it gets up here, then we don't have to worry about healing centers and treatment centers and stuff like that. Then those young people will already know, like, well, you know what, that's dangerous. No, thanks. I'm good. I'll stick to my dreams.
No, those are, I guess, very the modern day survival skills. When we traveled in the bush, go hunting, there's dangers on the land, on the ice, on the river, when you're traveling. But today, when our kids are traveling, these are the dangers that we need to make them aware of. And the schools, the health authorities, the law enforcement, the corrections, all these are a result of these bad decisions that are coming. But in terms of, I guess the question I would have is, how can we break that cycle? You see this addiction cycle that's happening. You see the meth is so addictive today. It's so cheap. It's effective, like you
Yeah,
said, 10, 11-year-olds. And these drug dealers are using this business plan of fronting drugs to people. And then once they're hooked, well, they're coming back. Their their business plan
yeah.
is what they have, right? So you're looking at the economics of this, but it's that decision, somebody empowered to make that decision to say, no, thanks, I'm good.
I think you started off with like I really liked what you said. When we were young, we were going out on the land. We were going hunting, and we were doing a lot of land-based things. I mean, I grew up in northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, so growing up as a young boy was a lot about on the land. But we had a teacher. We had a teacher that was showing us, don't you see how that ice ripples like that? Don't step on that. That's thin ice. You'll fall through. That's the water going underneath it that's causing it to ripple like that. So don't step there. Or other signs, that in the bush that, we would be taught, don't do that, And I think we have to go back to some of that land-based teaching, but in the sense that to teach our children, our young people, like when they do go to the city, when they do go out, that like this is what could happen. These are the things that you need to stay away from. We need to bring back our sense of identity within our youth, make them proud again of being Anishinaabe. I suffered with addiction for 40 years, and it started off as a young 13, 14-year-old boy and having some traumatic events happen that left me with a misunderstanding of who I was. And for 40 years, I fought that. And this last time when my kids found me, I mean, I was homeless in Edmonton. I was lost everything. And they brought me home. My daughter was getting married, my youngest girl. And I found the lodge, and I found a teacher who didn't really judge me for anything that I had did in life, but tried to instill in me my responsibilities as an Anishinaabe man, and help me heal through some of my own trauma to be able to stand upright again. And I think that's where we need to be. We need to. The residential school system took a lot out of us. They took a lot out of how we thought, how we lived in our cultures and our traditions. And having those values reinstilled in us again, from that perspective. I'm not saying anything bad about the church. I'm just saying about that whole era of assimilation took a lot of out of us without really equipping us. So to be in the new world, we'll call it, and it kind of left us in the hallway. You know, we were locked out of that door, which was our past and our traditions, and then we were locked out of that door, which was the future of the Canadian society, and it kind of left us in this limbo of a hallway. And I think that's as we're starting to emerge now and starting to heal from that, we can start unlocking those doors so that we can move into that new era. And that's what I tell the kids. They're that generation. Everything is out in the open now. They're the generation. Your cookums and your mushums and your moms and dads may have suffered great trauma, but you're the generation that can change that. But you can't change that if you're dead.
Yeah, that's I guess I feel what you're saying in terms of like as a Métis, I see our infinity sign with the two worlds bound together because
Mm.
of the mixed bloods. But when we walk in this world, you can't don't convert, like don't give up your indigenous past and go to a modern world and say, this is how I'm going to survive. You got to walk in both worlds and
Yep, you
be
have to. And
strong.
then that's, you have to, but it's the values that instill in us, that to live by a certain set of morals and values and to be able to be proud of those and be able to show yourself as who you are and walk in that world that way and be proud of that. We have a lot of young people that aren't proud. I was one for the longest time, and trying to instill that, and that's where the "I'm good" part comes from. That's where the "I'm good" will come into play. No thanks, I'm good. Will instill that empowerment. Like I'm good. Like I don't need that. I don't need that drug to fit in. I don't need that to make myself feel better. Um, I'm good. And being in recovery, I had to put my recovery as the most important thing in my life. More important than my wife, more important than my job, more important than my kids. The hardest thing that I've ever had to do, though, Rick, was make my recovery more important than my son's death.
Wow.
And I realized, like I promised my wife, I said this won't change me. I won't go back to deal with this pain. I will deal with this pain. And the way that I'm dealing with this pain is by sharing this message so that no other mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, sister, aunt, brother ever has to feel this again. You know, we're a long way away. Yes, I know. But if we can save and change the direction of one, two, three youth, then it's been worth it.
Well, in our traditional ways, the warriors were the ones that protected our families and our communities. And that's the role you're playing as a warrior, regardless of your own pain, I guess, the grief that you carry. You have this hope that, if you can save a life, as you mentioned, or take a message to an elder that can pass it on. You've done that already, even as an example with my wife, is a teacher here in our community. And she took your message that we heard on your APTN interview and took it to her classroom. And like you said, that one child came to her and nodded his head. Now I understand because they didn't know, like you said, the opioid thing is like a big city thing. It's that drug
Yeah,
supply. If you're addicted out there, then that danger is there. But if that tainted drug is in your neighborhood, it's down the street, and you want to test out something, and these little kids, they're going to test like we did. There's no
yeah,
different. You can't blame them. We did the same thing. Our elders did the same thing. So it's life, but it's as we said, if ice is not thick out there and we don't do our part of warning our kids, then we're not doing our job. So I commend you for the work that you're doing today
thank you.
as a
No,
warrior.
it's
It's
not something that I chose, but I mean, it's something that it just somebody had to.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing that I know a lot of parents, because when we went public with Harlan's death, on the media and everything else, like on my Facebook is public, anybody can send me a message if they want to. Um, I got a number of parents that were saying thank you, thank you for saying something. My son died this way, my daughter died this way. And nobody was talking about it, because when we talk about death by drugs, there's a shame, or an embarrassment. Or I had people phoning me saying, I didn't know your son suffered from addiction. And I love my son. I was extremely proud of the man that he had become. I was extremely proud of the decisions and choices that he was making. Why he made that one, I could drive myself crazy trying to figure that out. But he did. I have no control over that. So it's my way of honoring his life, um, and going forward, and sharing his story and his life with other people. I'm hurt by the way he died. I'm not embarrassed by the way he died. You know, he made a bad choice, and it could happen to any one of our children. It could happen to any one of us. You know, one of you talked about the kids, trying things, and then you going to the street and being curious. We have one slide that we put up during our presentation, and it has 4 different drugs. It has, 2 little lines of cocaine, 2 pills that, kind of look like ecstasy, 2 pills, and like the one drug now is Molly, and 2 marijuana joints. And then I asked the kids, of each one of these has, like there's two, one of the two has fentanyl in it. Can you tell me which one? Some will guess, and I will say, well, how do you know? And at the end of it, it's like, well, we don't know. I said, exactly. You don't know. So why would you take that chance with your life?
You mentioned that there was kits in terms of testing some of these drugs or knowing what
Yeah,
me, that's community empowerment. The community needs to know sometimes, and maybe that's a way as well.
yeah. When we're talking about harm reduction, um, you know, I I take Narcan kits with me. I don't distribute them, but I show the kids what they are. And I tell them that, just because you have this in your backpack doesn't mean you're doing drugs. What it means is that you're prepared to save a life. This was the number one thing, in the event that happened in the paw, surrounding my son's death, because nobody had Narcan. Nobody knew about Narcan, or they didn't have it available. And so he was left there until the paramedics arrived. And then by the time the paramedics got there, he didn't have a heartbeat, so Narcan wouldn't have been effective. The other 3 still had heartbeats, so they were administered Narcan and they were revived. And they had to work on Harlan about 45 minutes to establish a heartbeat. And by then, he had suffered a catastrophic brain injury. So after that event, the town of the Paw, and bless their hearts, um, did a store-to-store emergency Narcan training, and equipped every store, with Narcan kits, and taught them how to use it. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to buy drugs in every store, but those stores are now equipped to save a life if something should happen in their establishment. So that's what we tell the youth. Just because you have it, they're the nasal spray kind that you just put in the nose and you spray. We were in the community of Nelson House, and they asked, like, what Joe, what can we do? And I said, you know what, you put a Narcan kit in every house in your community, and you teach them how to use it. Hope that they never have to use it. It's like the fire extinguisher, right?
Yeah.
You have it in the house, but you hope you never have to use it. And these are ways in harm reduction. The test strips are relatively new. They're starting to come out. And, that's something that the health departments in each community can look into, is supplying that. I know, in the city here, we do, they give out needles and clean kits and all this stuff as far as harm reduction. And they're starting to initiate drug testing so that you can ensure yourself what you're doing. So these are some of the avenues that the health directors can take in each community. I know we just had a big meeting, harm reduction meeting with Q8 Tribal Council and their health directors, and these were some of the things that we talked about. But it's like it's like Mom used to say, if you don't want to get pregnant, keep your legs closed, right? If you don't want to die from fentanyl poisoning, tainted drugs, then just don't do them. You know, just learn to say no thanks. I'm good.
Well, Harlan's, I guess I keep looking at that sweater of 13. I think a lot of these myths about the drugs and about the dangers itself. But looking at the number 13, a lot of people believe 13 is an unlucky number. But 13 is a sacred number. In my mind, with 13 full moons a year, that's a sacred number. And
Mhm.
I think it's time for people to realize, there's a cycle of myths out there that, it could be mental health. We knew from this pandemic that mental health would be a big crunch after this pandemic is done, and you see it worldwide. It's affecting many people, but a lot of people went into drugs as well because of the
Yeah.
availability of drugs and also the legalization of cannabis. It just opened up. But then this meth comes in, and this cheap poison that's coming in, and there's also another drug besides fentanyl or another poison that's coming in that's the one that brings the scabies, but Narcan doesn't affect that drug. It doesn't
The
neutralize.
drugs are changing, and people are asking, well, why are they putting this in recreational drug use? And then it just comes, excuse me, it just comes down to one word: greed. Greed. That's all it is. They don't care about you. You know, as a former drug dealer, I would be your best friend. Hi, how you doing, Rick? Yeah, sure, I got your stuff. No worry, you can pay me later. Don't worry about it. Leaving you with the impression that I'm your friend because I want your money. That's it. That's it. Yeah, I'm not proud of the past life I lived, and but that's what we got to get the kids to understand, that they're not their friends. You know, people that they're buying drugs from are not their friends. They may think that, but that's in reality, it's not. You talked about the 13 and on my son's jersey, and my son was born on a Friday the 13th in 1991. And I closed his casket on the 13th of May. Well, tomorrow will be 10 months. Tomorrow will be 10 months. March 13th will be 10 months. So that's his number, and we love the Winnipeg Jets. You know, so it's just my way of staying close to him, every day. I spoiled myself one day, and when I first bought that jersey, my friends gave it to me, and just for playing Boston, and I'd never been rinkside before, and so I told my wife, I want to buy a rinkside ticket right next to the bench, and sure enough, I got a nice second row, not right at rinkside, and yeah, we won that game 4-1. So I knew he was there. Like he's with me all the time. I know that, but this is his message. I'll tell you. I'll share one more thing about the day. There's an iconic photo that's been circulated through the media, and you can Google my name, Google Harlan's name, and you'll see this photo. He's on life support, and we're head to head, forehead to forehead, and I should share also how fentanyl and fentanyl poisoning has really affected my kids and our family. Their mother, 2 years prior to Harlan's death, um, was suffering from addiction, but she was in recovery. And then on her birthday, she decided to buy herself a treat. And she was addicted to cocaine, crack and crack cocaine. She bought one rock and she went home on her birthday. She thought she would do herself a treat, locked herself in the bedroom, and they found her 2 days later. The crack that she had bought was laced with fentanyl.
Oh my.
That was 2 years prior to Harlan dying. So I knew, like my kids know, he was probably had maybe one beer too many, lowered his inhibitions, one maybe trying to fit in with a new work crew. Like I said, I could drive myself crazy. But that picture of us, I was devastated. I didn't know, like, I'm just thinking, like, what do I do? Like, I'm the only parent, I don't have his mother to talk to, say, what are we going to do? And all I could hear him tell me was, I'm gone, Dad. I'm gone. And then, like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me to do? He just said 2 words: tell others. And you just hear them, right? Just like he was in my ear, just tell others. And then once the confirmation came from the MRI that he had suffered a catastrophic brain injury, that if he was even able to breathe on his own, that he would be laying there in that vegetation state, until he died from some other complication. And so I talked to the kids, and I couldn't do that to my son. And so we entered him into the organ donation program. And he was able, in his heart, of the way Harlan was, always giving, able to change the life of, I think, 4 or 5 people with the donation of his organs. Because he was a young, healthy 31-year-old man. Made a bad choice.
No, it's our condolences to you and your family, but we acknowledge the the strength that it takes for you to spread this message. And in the spirit of Harlan, uh, we can't say thanks enough for saying the words for us to hear. And
Oh, thanks, Rick. And I just want to point out, anybody wants to follow us on Facebook, we just look for No Thanks, I'm Good. I'll stand up again here, look for this big yellow sign. That's our page. Follow us. We try and put updates. We try to, inform. And, if your communities in Saskatchewan want us to come out there and share our story or share the presentation, we'd be more than happy to, because I really believe, like, this needs to be a national campaign. Canada needs a national anti-drug campaign for our youth. And I get it. They've legalized marijuana. I get it. They want to put the opioid crisis on addiction, but they're leaving out a whole base of population that do recreational drugs, and giving them a false sense of security that they're safe doing them. And we need to tell them that they're not.
you're absolutely right. I think a national campaign, because all our kids, doesn't matter if it's Treaty 10 in northern Saskatchewan, Treaty 5, Treaty 8, all these different regions of communities, this impact is, it's it doesn't discriminate. So it
Nope.
doesn't matter if you're Métis, Dene, it could be Ukrainian, Somalian, and this drug or these poisons are so readily available. You see this truckloads of RCMP and border stops with the semi-load of this fentanyl drug or the meth drugs. They're hauling them in bulk. So
Yep.
organized crime is involved. There's a whole just that's what we're up against. But you gotta, like, you're right. No thanks, I'm good is empowering your youth to be able to navigate their lives through these dangers.
Yep. Do these dangers, and that's once we can get rid of the demand, the supply will take care of itself. How many things that you were bought as a kid that wasn't in demand anymore that has disappeared, right, from our stores?
Right.
And it's the same thing with the drug world. If we can just eliminate the demand and empower these young people. Yes, we need to tackle some social and economic issues. Yes, we need to do some healing. Yes, we need to get back to some land-based teaching. and instill a pride in our people. But overall, in the general public, there just needs to be more awareness of the dangers of recreation. Because I'm going to tell you, every addict that's out there right now suffering from addiction started out by trying something for the first time.
No, and that's where that decision has to be made. No, thanks,
Yeah.
I'm good. That's if they can empower them. I think that's you got the most powerful message right now for equipping our kids for their future. Harlan, I thank you. Our Treaty 10 News tries to portray, a good way of life for us to make decisions into the future. Treaty 10 extends into Lac Brochet and Brochet into northern Manitoba, and then it goes also to Cold Lake in Alberta. So this treaty region encompasses the whole Churchill River system. So family in Sandy Bay, we got La Ronge, we got Stanley Mission, La Loche, we got the Cree, Dene, and Métis. This message is what we need to hear now because our kids every day when they're growing up and going to school or going into their communities have to know these decisions. And then the other one is they're going to school down south, and there's predators
Yes.
down in the bigger cities when they have to go for education or even an evacuation. It could be a fire evacuation from one of our communities, and they're exposed to these pitfalls or the decisions that may affect them and their families. So I can't say enough for this message to be brought. But in closing, Harlan, what or oh, I can't see he's
That's all
with
right.
us. He's
So he's there. He's sitting there with
he's
us. So
here,
it's me,
man.
Harlan.
So what would you like to say in closing to our communities and to our families?
Two words. Don't be afraid. I guess that's three words. Don't be afraid. Have those hard conversations. Sit down with your children, you know, talk about it and listen, listen to understand what their life is like because their life is much different than our lives, and to reconnect with the parent child bond, just have those hard conversations, not out of judgment, not out of condemnation, but out of love. We instill those things in our young people, and we come to them in with loving arms, then they're more apt to receive. Also, if communities are interested, I'll leave you my contact information after you have it. Um, yeah, the thing, and we do have some materials that we've worked with branding that we like to send out or bring to the communities with us to posters. I told your wife I'd send her some of that. Yeah, reach out, connect. I mean, if you want us to come into the community to present, we'll be more than happy to do that.
Well, the Naskamun, Joseph Fourier, kawihtamuya, kaita gustamahta pikskata hogtussimnanak, pihtsupuinumap magutiuta, gaputan stuhtahko, goyaswatahko yo. No thanks, I'm good, teituitogi spin. Asutamuogi wetagutsihtato. So thank you very much, Joseph Fourier. The story is a heartbreaking story, but the strength that you have to share the story with us is commendable. So this is Rick LaLiberty speaking to Joseph Fourier from Manitoba on the issue of fentanyl, if it's affecting and poisoning our communities. Rick LaLiberty at Treaty 10 News. Thank you.
It was a